Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, let's start with the tweets of September 7th. The first one is, what was Nike thinking?
Nike is a goddess. She's one of the goddesses of Athena, and she has wings. And Greece and Rome and Troy all fought over her. But eventually the Persians came and took the statue of Nike and clipped the wings. Nike's wings have been clipped. Why? Because Nike represents victory, and our flag represents victory. And just do it is not quite the phrase that you need when you want to face the flag and all of those who have just done it and died for America. So basically, Nike's wings have been clipped, and the slave trading company that makes our tennis shoes and our sporting gear and sells it to us for, 100 times the price it takes for them to make it. And, of course, there are corporatists who try to convince us of all kinds of things, especially that sports are a good thing and that people going out bashing their heads on a football field and 90-some% of them getting brain damage is a good thing. So, Nike?
Well, you hold that view about football. I am a diehard Florida State Seminole fan, so don't be trash-talking football.
I'm trash-talking anyone who'd go out there and know that they're going to get brain damage and think that being paid a lot for it is a good thing. Look at what happens to those football players. They're some of the most criminal, aggressive people in America. Why are we listening to them? Either they abide by their contract or they don't. And Nike, you just lost a huge group of your fans. People forget that the Trump followers are 65% of America. Why would you alienate 65% of your customers? For what? Being anti-American? To be anti-Trump? This is Trump derangement syndrome again.
Matt Rosendale will be a great senator from a great state, Montana. He's a fighter who will be tough on crime and the border, fight hard for our Second Amendment, and loves our military and our vets. He has my full and complete endorsement.
Trump is a political rock star like nothing we've ever seen in American history. He said last night as we listened to his speeches are so amazing. They're just so him. People stand in line for such huge amounts of time just so they can hear Trump be Trump, because there really is nobody else like him. And no matter what you think of him, it doesn't matter. What he said last night is the fact. Basically, judge him by his fruits. Judge him by what he's done, not by what people are calling him. Don't judge him by the names people are calling him. And what did he say also? If you don't vote, they're going to try to impeach him. So, at this midterm, when people don't get out and vote, Republicans need to get out and vote for MAGA candidates to make sure that they do not put forth articles of impeachment that then waste the country's time, because they cannot impeach a man who does not have a crime, and he has no crime. So when you even create the articles of impeachment, you have to state a crime. So it's all such a bunch of nonsense, but we'll get to that in just a minute.
Now, I know you've been chomping at the bits to really get to this one big juicy tweet, because it's going to take us into crazy areas. So folks, grab your latte, grab your cheesecake or a bottle of whiskey, whatever it takes. Sit back, because Thomas, I want to know it all. And here's the tweet. The Woodward book is a scam. I don't talk the way I'm quoted. If I did, I would not have been elected president. These quotes were made up. The author uses every trick in the book to demean and belittle. I wish the people could see the real facts, and our country is doing great.
Remember the other day when you pointed out that Media Matters has already stated that they have basically endless Soros funds to print books? That would be enter Bob Woodward. And then the Huffington Post article by his good buddy Carl Bernstein, the Woodward Bernstein effect, the Watergate journalists who supposedly investigative journalists who uncovered the biggest scam and caused Nixon to step down. I want to explain to you that was a complete and absolute lie, and that what they're doing now is almost a complete replication of what they were doing then. Let's remember that it's Spygate that's going on now. Clapper admitted he sent spies into the Trump campaign. Literally, Carter Page and others. He says it was for the country's own good and for Trump's own good, because Trump is an idiot and he didn't understand that Russians are our enemies. Okay? Well, what were Nixon, Watergate burglars really doing?
I think they were hiding pedophilia.
That's one of the things. That's the top surface. The deeper surface is that George H.W. Bush, through Zapata Oil, had created, which is a oil company that was linked with Mexico, Carlos Slim, New York Times.
Cemex, they put blood in the cement.
See where we're going with this? So, Mexican money, huge amount, basically unlimited amounts of money were pouring in through Zapata Oil, making donations to presidential elections. This was the hugest federal elections manipulation of election donations that anyone had ever heard of. Now, we know it still goes on, and it's Chinese and it's Saudi Arabian, and I could go into all of that. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, all of that. That's not the issue. The issue is, early on, it was, in fact, George H.W. Bush who told Richard Nixon that he had to step down, because if he didn't, the entire Republican election fraud laundering, money laundering scheme, in other words, how Republicans got elected, would simply go down the tubes, because that's what they were going after. They weren't bugging the Watergate headquarters. They were going there for the files on Zapata Oil and George H.W. Bush, and the fact that he already was a secret member of the CIA, one of the top members. That's the reason when he joined the CIA, they made him the head of it. Why? He had already been an agent. He was part of the JFK assassination, and we all know this. It was through Zapata Oil. That's what it was about. That's what the missing tape was. That's what was being discussed in the missing tape of Richard Nixon. All right? So what do we have here? We have Woodward and Bernstein were two idiots that were fed that information.
They're still idiots.
Just
they work
like
for the New York Times and that other, Huffington Post?
Yes. So just like we just got through seeing James Wolfe give out the top secret information that was then spread to all of the news agencies through Ali Watkins, who still hasn't been charged for, he hasn't been charged for leaking. Supposedly there's an indictment. I haven't heard it, that it's been delivered. So, and like Andrew McCabe's case, supposedly through inside sources, we're finding out they've started a grand jury indictment. Well, that one's pretty secret, isn't it? Because the biggest leaker in the entire FBI, we're not going to hear anything about his grand jury indictment, but we will hear every single day an illegal report that breaks the secrecy of Robert Mueller's special investigation. So, what do we have? We have Ali Watkins doing exactly what Woodward and Bernstein were doing. Okay? They were simply being fed information, and they were printing it based upon what? Ali actually had real information, and she revealed top secret information to all the news agencies after she would again and again have these breaking stories that had an insider, a top official. Yes, James Wolfe was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee's intelligence staffers. He's the head guy. He'd been there for a long, long time. He had been leaking institutionally for a long time. He was John McCain's guy. He was Henry Kerner's guy. He was working for the State Department for Victoria Nuland. He was the guy who passed the stuff through to Bruce Orr, who passed it to Christopher Steele and begged Christopher Steele to come over and testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee. These things are all known.
Just trying to slow you down, because sometimes people have to get the picture in their mind that James Wolfe worked for the Senate Intelligence Committee, right? Used to. And this is the most corrupt committee you're going to find on Capitol Hill. And it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrats. It could be Burr, it could be Warner. Look at that list. They're all corrupt. So this very corrupt committee employs this James Wolfe that then leaks classified information, everything, to a little bimbo named Ali Watkins, who's a reporter for the New York Times.
Who didn't get kicked out, she actually got a second job when this happened. So she didn't get any kind of repercussions for her national security attack on our nation.
I just had to, because, sometimes a picture, they write in the comment box and they go, this couldn't be as horrible as you described, but it is. And then if you look at the Senate Intelligence Committee, you'll also see Dianne Feinstein. And remember, she had Chinese spies on her for 20 plus years?
Doing her work, representing her, speaking for her.
Yes.
And she called him her chauffeur when it came out that he was a Chinese spy.
And her husband, Richard, owns 10% of Avid, which is the software they use in all these propaganda media sites. So they're saying all the same thing to entrench us in their brainwashing. So I just want to say that before you go ahead. Go ahead.
Media matters.
You mean David Brock, who is still not paid his taxes?
Correct. Mark my words, George Soros money through David Brock. He said it's on his list. He bragged about this. He's going to go out and get people to write books to get their agenda done, which is to get President Trump out of the White House through an impeachment. And so they went after, supposedly the best investigative journalist of all times. No, they were used. They were puppets. They were what's called useful idiots in the business. And now they've been turned into useful idiots again because they've basically been told that the mainstream media has gone so far out there with all the accusations, as long as they don't go any further, Bob Woodward in his book, than the insane accusations that have been made that they did not get sued for. And I mean all mainstream media. Woodward just went out there and he got every single crazy allegation from every single mainstream media source where they say, in the Avid, it says, fill in your own vomit. And then whatever was vomited out, because they didn't get sued, Woodward gathered that up and said it was a senior White House official. The problem is, he didn't know that what he did was a treasonous act. It is against national security. Executive privilege. Everything the president does in a private meeting could affect the national security of this country. You cannot make stuff up, and you cannot do that during an election, especially during the respected, 2 months before the election, which we're in now. So Bob Woodward came out with another October surprise, but too early because the New York Times knows they're losing, so they're doing their October surprises early. We told you this was going to happen. We told you that Mueller was going to come out with his. He did. And now the whistleblowers have stepped up and came out with theirs to go against Rosenstein and Mueller, and so they have some questions to answer. And on Bruce Orr's testimony, we told you one of the rats is going to sing. Bruce sang a little bit, and that revealed that there was no hearing for the FISA warrants. I told you there was no hearings for the FISA warrants, and my conclave buddies told me, and ladies told me, that I was going too far to claim that there never was a FISA court warrant.
There were no ladies that told you that.
Correct.
They agreed with you.
Okay, the ladies, especially you and your team, because you knew that it had to be that way.
Yeah.
When it doesn't make any sense the way that it worked, then it didn't work that way. So they couldn't have gotten the FISA warrant. Remember, the FISA warrant for Carter Page was the insurance policy after they'd already tried John Brennan's attack and a counterintelligence attack with Peter Strzok, a section head of the CIA counterintelligence department. So they opened up. When Comey failed with Franklin Farrar, with Felix Sater, with all of his treasonous attacks on Trump up front, trying to get Sam Clovis, Carter Page was inserted into the Trump campaign, all those things, those all failed. The myth that the DNC had been hacked, that didn't hold any water. So the dossier wasn't looking good, because from the first sentence on, you would just laugh if you read it. And this article that the New York Times posted, you would laugh. You would laugh if you had a brain. You could not possibly consider that article or Bob Woodward's book, not a single word of it, a truth. No, you just read it. Read the dossier. It is impossible for a person with an IQ above 70 to believe the dossier was of any credible intelligence. And who said that? John Brennan said that. He said it wasn't used for the FISA warrant. Liar. He didn't draw a FISA warrant when he wiretapped George Papadopoulos from July of 2016 on. And at that point, he didn't have any intelligence to either create with Peter Strzok, the CIA counterintelligence black ops operation, which not even the president or anyone was informed of, which was Peter Strzok, our James Bond, who seems to have even national security letter authority. He can write a letter that gives the authority to do illegal things based upon a threat to national security that the president doesn't even get informed of. Are you ready for that? The Gang of Eight was not informed of Peter Strzok's national security letters. I told everyone from the beginning. They didn't need the FISA court. They were surveilling everyone.
Because they're just straight up criminals.
Obama had given an executive order saying that all NSA data was going to be in a raw fashion given out to anyone with a single sign-on with the access. He then gave access to everyone and said, everyone, go after Trump. Full court press. Oh my gosh, he's going to get elected. So what happened in July? That's when Brennan jumped in. That's when Hillary started her 8 emails talking about the 17 American intelligence agency in the IC community all agree that Putin is in bed with Trump and Putin wants Trump elected and Putin doesn't want Hillary elected, okay? Why would she start saying that at the exact same time that Peter Strzok went over after rewriting Comey's letters of exoneration, we now find out just in the last week, Peter Strzok wrote the letters of exoneration, the letter of exoneration that Comey read to the world, and then later he even corrected it, and remember a bunch of people corrected it to make sure there was no legal guilt even associated with her. And remember, she was never investigated. That was just what Peter Strzok wrote as a counterintelligence disinformation campaign, which they called the midterm exam, where they never examined Hillary, never gave Hillary an examination or even had a 302 written on an interview with her. Nothing. Nothing. Hillary was never investigated for the email. That's the reason Loretta Lynch said downgrade it to a matter, because it was not an investigation. It was, in fact, a CIA counterintelligence operation led by Peter Strzok. We now find out because he wrote it. Same guy then went to the FBI, started the dossier, made sure the dossier had input from everybody, Russians, Ukrainians, Brits, FBI, everybody. Every weaponized person at the top of the Obama administration, especially in the intelligence community, had input into that dossier, and they all need to go down because it was a conspiracy, and that's what they're fighting. That's why the book was released. That's why the New York Times may go down over this, and basically stuck their neck on the block exactly as they did with the Russian dossier, because they were one of the first to come out they were being given briefings by Christopher Steele and then releasing that information without verifying it, knowing that it was even unverified, knowing that Christopher Steele worked for the FBI and worked for Fusion GPS and was being paid by Hillary Clinton. Because why? They had FBI representatives. At one of the meetings with the New York Times, they had a representative from the Democratic National Committee. I've said this so many times, I'm blue in the face. They were there. New York Times is part of the conspiracy. They need to go down.
Well, now, Thomas, you take these people like James Wolfe and Allie Watkins, Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein. What I find is interesting is let's go back to Lindsey Graham when he is interviewing, asking questions of this Brett Kavanaugh. Now, you know I'm not too happy that Brett Kavanaugh is sitting there because he and his wife are senior executive service operatives. So I'm going to be questioning everything about him for his whole career. But he has asked very interesting questions from Lindsey Graham about military tribunals, and you're going to explain this to us. I then look at James Wolfe, Allie Watkins, Bob Woodward, and Carl Bernstein, and I wonder, could they be charged with treason for what they've done? And would they face military tribunals?
Well, Betsy, I'm so glad you asked that. I'm also so glad that you put the commentary there beneath that little video of watching that happen at the place where what did they call it?
Okay, well, before you go off on that, folks, because he's saying this, I'll make sure to have that link inside the description box so you can see it. What it is, are you talking about the funeral?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a little theory here. So if everyone will remember, at McCain's funeral, Huma Abedin goes straight to Lindsey Graham, talks to him very seriously, and then as soon as she's finished, she retreats. the next day or two, whenever Lindsey Graham is then questioning Kavanaugh about the military tribunals, I'm thinking that Huma was there to give the message from Hillary Clinton to Graham to ask those questions for a particular reason.
Hillary Clinton might as well have been John McCain's handler, and Huma was defended by John McCain as one of his last acts on the floor of the Senate, where he came forward and said Huma was a good person and people need to stop attacking her, though her mother puts out the paper for the Muslim Brotherhood, and she is the leader of the Muslim Sisterhood. So Huma Abedin cannot possibly be anything but an espionage spy plant. Her laptop gave availability to basically anybody who could get the password from her, which then gave you access to 400,000 emails from John Podesta, from Hillary, so you could see everything that Hillary was doing. It was a pay-to-play thing. So what did he get told in his ear, Mr. Lindsey? Graham, he is such a wimp and he is John McCain's shadow.
Yes. Okay?
Now, what did John Kasich say? He said when they put John McCain to death. Recently, when we saw at the funeral, when they put John McCain to death, he did not correct himself. The person interviewing him did not correct John Kasich, one person who is the top of the deep state, and I mean internationally. He is just about as bad as it gets. I don't want to get into it, but why did he say John McCain was put to death? Because we told you that John McCain had been exposed not only for the millions that his institute had been given, both by Saudi Arabia, by Russians and others. He was caught with Oleg Deripaska, and they have film of him going and meeting with him, that the person who is the number one person. They now say, oh, no, they were trying to flip some of Putin's Russian friends. That's why Oleg Deripaska is playing like he used to be our CIA asset in Iran, trying to get out one of our CIA agents, spent $25 million helping the CIA. Oh, but now he's our enemy because, why? Because Hillary said he should be our enemy. And then he started giving money to Daniel Jones, Dianne Feinstein's security, the Senate Intelligence Agency intelligence staffer Daniel Jones, another person under the hammer of Henry Kerner and James Wolfe, goes out and creates his own company to carry on the work of Fusion GPS. What's it called? Pin Quarter Group. $50 million, millions of it came from Oleg Deripaska, a bunch from George Soros, and a bunch from other criminals, Russians. I can name them, but I'm not going to. Their names have never been revealed, but I can tell you who they were. It's not a problem. So, the oppositional research that Fusion GPS was doing, which was supported and funded by the shadow government, in other words, Obama, let's just keep going back, Obama and Hillary and Podesta, okay? And Valerie Jarrett and Loretta Lynch and Comey. And behind the scenes, Robert Mueller was telling them his opinion too. Make no mistake about it, he and Comey couldn't be any closer. As Trump says, hugging and kissing, he can show you 100 pictures of them hugging and kissing. They literally sat in the same chair after one another in companies where they made so much money, it's ludicrous. The chair was still hot from Comey's butt when Mueller sat down there. Same at HSBC, same at Lockheed. They're so corrupt. Anyway, we know that out of the Senate Intelligence Committee, they have been told that they were, of course, Hillary was going to be elected, but we had to stop Trump. So they all incriminated themselves. Every person on the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Gang of Eight, except for Devin Nunes, who was not told the truth by John Brennan. John Brennan, when he started a counterintelligence operation, Crossfire Hurricane, was obliged by law to tell the Gang of Eight, the heads of the Intelligence Committee in the House and in the Senate, and the leaders of the Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate, the Gang of Eight. He had to go. What did he choose to do? Not tell them all at once. He told each one of them a different story. And he told Devin Nunes almost nothing. And he told him a big fat lie, as a matter of fact. Nunes isn't coming out to say that because then his partners in the Gang of Eight would have to then testify and they'd all be roasted. But they knew all along about the fake dossier because Brennan had to say the following: I have heard that there was a video of Trump being peed on by whores in Europe, and I'm spending $100,000 a week paying Sergei Milliken Poroshenko, and we are starting a counterintelligence operation against a member inside of Trump team. That would be George Papadopoulos. No, they didn't even interview him. They opened it in July of 2016. When did they interview him the first time? He didn't even know he was being interviewed, but he was wiretapped the whole time. Was in January, and then they didn't even take him in. But 1 year later, they arrest him in a big scene at the airport so that it makes the news that there's a smear that for over a year, George Papadopoulos has been working with Russia. The only good contacts Papadopoulos really ever had with Russia was created by the British spies who set him up, and literally George Papadopoulos was given positions in Britain that made him look like he was a big member of the Trump team. Trump never even spoke to the guy.
But let's get back to this thing with Lindsey Graham asking Brett Kavanaugh about military tribunals.
Sorry, I really drifted there.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I drifted overseas.
Right.
You get me started on the Brits, and
I know,
you know how
but
it
see,
is.
this is the key, because Graham had to ask this question in public because everybody in the swamp needs to know how Brett Kavanaugh is going to rule on military tribunals.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you the reason, then I'll tell you the details. The reason is he announced to everyone, Brett Kavanaugh, are you going to hang or execute the domestic enemies that are part of the Russian dossier? And he said, oh, hell yeah, that's the law. There's two bodies of law that support that. He says, but is that...
Don't yell.
He said, he referred to military, and then he said...
Civil.
Kavanaugh, no, Lindsey was referring, and he actually quoted the law, and he was making a clear distinction that there do not have to be military tribunals to try somebody for a military crime as a domestic enemy of America and still a citizen. That's our law. We are all law enforcement. Who are they fighting against? Enemies, domestic and foreign. Okay? Domestic. We have domestic enemies now. He just got Brett Kavanaugh to say he will execute them, as has happened, and then he quoted the case.
And
the cases where we have executed people for these espionage.
Do you notice when you watch that clip how prepared Brett Kavanaugh was?
He knew the very cases off the top of his head.
Yes, that looked very staged. Now, if you're a senator right now, or a congressman, or anyone in the swamp, this has got to be a shot across the bow. Because if Brett Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court, he's already telling you that he's going to decide if you can go through a military tribunal based upon these cases.
What he's saying is, he was told by Huma, let all those MFs know they're all going down if Hillary goes down for the dossier. So little Mr. Lindsey Graham had one of his staffers do the work to pull up the equivalent or the relevant law, and that's what he was quoting as if he knew what he was talking about. And yet Kavanaugh already knew that. Why? Because this is the big issue. When you find out, okay, do you think that Trump didn't say, hey, what do you think about this coup d'etat that's going on right now against me? You think he didn't ask Brett Kavanaugh that when he met with him privately? Probably his first question. And when Brett said, well, I've already written that, sir, pieces on that, and there's two bodies of law. There's one that covers those who are in the military or those who have, and I want to underscore this, military top secret security clearances, because you sign agreements where you give away all your rights, basically, to have civil defense for the fact that you committed espionage, which is a national defense attack, whether you're domestic or foreign, whether you're in the military or not. So, if you're in the military, that's it. You sign those, and if you do that, it's a military, it is a tribunal. Look how long they took on General Petraeus for having one piece of paper in his desk drawer that his girlfriend probably didn't even look at.
Well, this would be like the Nuremberg trials. But here in America.
Correct.
And people need to wake up to, we have people who were committing treason against the United States. If Hillary had won, we wouldn't be able to talk about this. And we've uncovered all the different technological devices that are in place right now, ready to be slammed on us to put us in prison planet. So wake up.
And then, of course, I'm sure the second question, or I imagine the second question Trump would have asked him is, what's this junk about impeachment? What you did with Kenneth Starr and Clinton? You almost got him impeached because you basically rewrote the Constitution. And he said, sir, I didn't write that. Those were my aides, and they were being bought off by somebody else. I just put my name on these things. That's why I go either way, sir. I go with the Republicans. I go with the Democrats. I go with whoever pays me, sir. That's what he told Trump. That's essentially the bottom line. And you know Trump gets to the deal real fast. It didn't take a New York minute to figure these things out. And then Trump didn't care. He already knew his record on the other things. Now, does Trump care if he gets elected? No. What is this doing? It is scaring up all of the swamp creatures, and they're all showing who they are. So when Huma told him to say that, remember what that means. Lindsey Graham could not have said that if his friend John McCain were still alive, if John McCain really is dead.
Why?
Because John McCain would be the first one to go. He's the one who actually paid for that dossier. He's the one who started it. He's the one who gave the Russian names of the people to go after. He's the one who literally helped plan it, and the whole time was active. And when it wasn't going fast enough, he got a copy and he released it to the FBI in a big public notice and gave his version of what's in it. He became as bad as the mainstream media. He was complicit. He was a dead man walking.
So they had to get rid of him.
He was a dead man walking. And that's a fact. He's the most complicit culprit of them all in all of this. He literally got money to pay for it from Oleg Deripaska. And we know that because Oleg Deripaska is still paying for oppositional research against Trump. And who do they pay to? Daniel Jones. And what does Daniel Jones do? Well, he colludes with the Mueller investigation. Where do you think they get some of this stuff?
All right, now let's go back to the New York Times and let's go back to all these reporters. Now that everybody in the country knows about military tribunals and that we can use them on American citizens who've been working with foreigners to overthrow our government, what happens to someone like James Wolfe and Allie Watkins, the journalist lovers?
Well, they could be hung or they could be lethal injection. They could be shot. It all depends upon which court they go before.
How about Mr. Woodward and Mr. Bernstein and anyone there at the New York Times?
Well, they're civilians. They'd be hung.
Okay, hung. So people, you need to brace yourselves because we got to go the full way to clean up this country and get us back on the right track. The corruption is it's so enormous. We have to do it here first. The rest of the world suffers if we don't clean this mess up.
What will happen is there would be somewhat like a military trial because this is an attack on our government. This is literally what they call a soft coup, but it's also called a regime change. It's also called a color revolution. It's called a George Soros color revolution. It's called a rogue CIA regime change. They've been doing this so long. They're so good at it. It would go to the Supreme Court. And it would have to be tried, and all these people would have to be part of the conspiracy. But before it could go to the Supreme Court, they would have to do the investigations, and they'd have to get the evidence.
Well,
as soon as they get the evidence, it depends on who collects it, and then who applies the law at that point. If they collect it and they say this is an active conspiracy, they arrest them all and move them all to Gitmo so that nobody can talk to them so they can't go on in America with this coup.
I have to know, but who is the they that
U.S.
will arrest
Marshals.
them? U.S. Marshals. And why does the Supreme Court have to hear this? If it's a military tribunal, then we bypass the corrupt federal judicial system.
No, it's not a military tribunal. These are civilians, many of them. And as I've said before, when you get ex-military, if they're still active or if they never became deactivated, you can still use military tribunal on them. That's why they used that on Petraeus. He was still active. They can use that on anybody. They couldn't use it on Flynn. He became deactivated. The problem was Flynn made big mistakes. But now the bigger problem is if the whistleblowers are true in the DOJ and that Robert Mueller really did threaten Flynn. If he did, Robert Mueller could go to jail for 30 years.
Well, wasn't Robert Mueller at one time military?
Yes, he was.
Okay, so then he would go straight to the military tribunal?
No. Only if they're still active, activatable, or they never decommissioned.
Well.
So they might be, a lot of these people stay in the reserves and you'd never know it. Now, let's go back. Woodward and Bernstein, they are now enemies of the state. Now, Bernstein only wrote the same garbage for Huffington Post, which of course they always go out of the country and use one of the 5 eyes as a protection tool for everything. That's anything we find out. They always use the 5 eyes because they're our friends. So if it happened in Britain, it didn't really happen here. If the British came here and did it, well, it really didn't happen here. So what did they do? Well, they got paid. Who by? Probably, more than likely, Media Matters, David Brock, which means George Soros. Why did they write it? Because, as I said, all that slander has already come out and nobody got sued and nobody got closed. So they took all the slander, put it in one place, and they tried to make a new Russian Trump dossier. Send it through Daniel Richman. Comey probably had his input into it. And who did they use as the person who's going to be the fall person? Sarah Jeong. Why do you think they hired that little crazy person? Why do you think they hired somebody who literally could not possibly have 1 second of an unbiased opinion? She is a white supremacist. Do you think she will ever write anything nice about Trump? So she was happy to put her neck on the chopping block. There'll probably only be one person go down, and it'll be her or somebody like her at New York Times. They've already been willing to give them up. But now let's go back to the bigger story. Why the New York Times? Why now? Because the election fraud that was going on during Nixon, that was being managed by George H.W. Bush, is still going on now. Carlos Slim gives $100 million to Frank Giustra every year for the Uranium One payoff. It's called the Giustra Clinton Sustainability Growth Fund. Slim came in, and we don't even know how much money he put into New York Times or how much of it he owns, because he's slick. He's not only slim. And he basically, how are we letting these foreigners have control over a propaganda machine which has now simply become a George Soros tool that is literally not only they should be liable for what they're saying, but they're liars. They know they're lying. That's against the Broadcasting and Decency Act, Section 230. Look it up, y'all. Trump can close them. The FCC can close them. And recently the FCC just got through saying this, that they're looking into why is it that the big companies and the big broadcasters don't understand a thing. The Board of Broadcasting Governors controls everything in America and everything broadcast in the name of America. And if you violate any of their rules, they can close you down without even asking. You don't have to go through a trial. You violated federal rules. Well, they've all violated those rules. And Avid and ISIS manage it, reading the prompters of lies that are all universal, monopoly, RICO, racketeering lies. That's what's going on. The New York Times is simply finally... let's remember, they were one of the first ones to come out to support the Russian dossier, knowing it was garbage. Remember, many of their people go in and work in these oppositional research firms that then become propaganda machines that control our government by election fraud, misinformation, and lies. Because they're private corporations, they think they can't get caught. That isn't correct. If they use it to broadcast, it's illegal. So they need someone at New York Times to take the fall because they have broadcasted something illegal, and they're going to say they believe the integrity of that person, and then they'll be able to say, oh, Sarah's young. Well, we might have been wrong with her integrity. That's why they always change the tops, the leaders of all the different social media groups. Why? So that nobody really knows anything what's going on. Look at the whitewashing of Sheryl Sandberg and Jack Dorsey. They never ask him a serious question.
Oh, it was just disgusting.
And we know the truth. We've already revealed the truth.
Yes. That
George Soros' Atlantic Council and the Digital Forensic Research Laboratories, IAs, have taken over Facebook and Google and YouTube, and that the U.S. Digital Service and their system, which is basically Eric Schmidt and Alphabet, no longer Google. Google, they already planned for Google to go down. They already planned for Facebook to go down.
Who's the they?
The people who own it. They've all pulled their money out of it. And they're pulling it out as fast as legally possible. Look where Eric Schmidt is. He went to North Korea, and then he went to China and hasn't come back. And now China is bold-facedly trading with North Korea against the sanctions and saying we should all eat it. But I want to say one thing that I did make a mistake, and that's that I said the totalitarian leader of China couldn't be removed. They're talking about removing him because he's gone so insane. No. And he's losing so bad to Trump. When you lose in China, they kill you. So Mr. Ma, Mr. Alibi, get ready. You don't get to retire. Not if your funds are in China.
All right, we've moved from the Woodward book to China and Ma. So let's come back here because we've got one more tweet after this.
Okay, one thing I need to make clear. Kissinger, Schmidt, and all of them banked on China. Facebook, everybody. Trump busted China. China is broke. Everything will fail. Their stock market will fail. Their currency will fail. Everything will fail. And then they'll hang that man or shoot him. They like to shoot him there. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just shoot him. So what I'm saying is, when Trump was elected, he disturbed all that. What was the first thing that happened when Trump got elected? Henry Kissinger went to him and said, please, Mr. Trump, believe me. Please believe me that China is the future.
The impersonation.
He is the evil emperor, okay? Mr. Kissinger is a beautiful evil emperor, and he even speaks like it, and always has spoken that way. And he was, of course, a Nazi, and he's wanted by many countries. And they want to prosecute him too and kill him for what he did because he's a mass murderer and he's admitted it. It's in his books. All you got to do is read them.
I could play a joke on our audience right now and just say, give you a word and let you run off into the weeds with it. Pope Francis.
Don't get me started on Pope Francis. They're talking about getting rid of him. Let's remember, Pope Francis was an Arab Spring. It was the Catholic Spring. They sent in the Jesuits. The Jesuits never had full control. They got Benedict in there. And Benedict put the Jesuits in control, and then it was an Arab Spring, and they told the Catholic Vatican, you either put a Jesuit in control that we can work with, because the Jesuits control the Knights of Malta, and they control, basically, remember, they're the ones who benefit from Soros's open borders. They get hundreds of billions a year. That's how the Catholic Church survives. Otherwise, they'd be bankrupt from just the pedophilia and from the sexual assault lawsuits that are pending in America, $4.5 billion that I know of. Haven't looked into it for over a year.
Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau is the Queen's man, and what he's doing now, I want to explain this. Their cultural heritage means their communication systems. Why is Justin ready for his country to go bankrupt, to protect their telecommunications company because of what we just found? Nortel, Northern Telecommunications Incorporated, Northern Telecommunications Limited, own the internet certificates. They started it. They owned it. They came to America, created a fake company, then sold that company to an asset management company. This is what we're revealing. So Justin Trudeau, right now, we have found out why it is that he is willing to give up his entire country to keep Americans from not having access to their telecommunication systems, because they control the world. And who controls Canada? They're UK, they're a Commonwealth, that's the Queen. We haven't found it out, but I almost will bet a $2 bill that the Queen's golden share is in NTL Incorporated.
Kim Jong-un.
Notice that he's drinking wine with the mad totalitarian emperor of China. All his people have said, sorry, Mr. Xi, there is no one road, one belt. That's called insane totalitarianism. And he's basically alienated almost every country in the world at this point. And why? Because they see Trump standing up to him. He had come out and said, one belt, one road, one belt, one world. Don't notice Taiwan, we own them. And do what we say, we now own all of your resources because we bought them with American funds that Hillary and Bill set up through Walmart, so that we took over 65% of manufacturing in America through Taiwan. Now, mind you, when we think that China manufactures for us, for a long time it was Taiwan did most of the manufacturing, and that's the reason there's a war right now between mainland China, President Xi, and Taiwan. If you even say the word Taiwan, they come and they basically use their Chinese form of like a Nazi SS to harass you so openly that it is absurd. They just sold 8% of the wealth of Deutsche Bank overnight. No one even knows how this transaction can go down. Why? Because they're bankrupt. They're pulling back everything, and just like the Japanese did when they came in, bought everything in America, and the rich people all laughed and said, let them buy it, we'll get it back for pennies on the dollar. When they collapse, we collapse them, we got it for pennies on the dollar. We're doing the same to China, but that's because Trump is a genius, not because he's using the rogue CIA. So North Korea will do anything that China tells them, no matter what. I told you, every time the China that North Korea speaks, they have to get Chinese permission. That's the way that it is.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Now, did you get all that running done? And can we get back to the tweets?
If you want.
Okay. And the last tweet is, under our horrible immigration laws, the government is frequently blocked from deporting criminal aliens with violent felony convictions. House GOP just passed a bill to increase our ability to deport violent felons. Crazy Dems opposed. Need to get this bill to my desk fast.
I would call it illegal Dems, because they just voted against lawfulness. They know with MS-13, with all the murderers that keep getting released, with Kate Steinle, with the whole thing, that them voting against it meant they voted for sanctuary cities, they voted for illegal aliens having full rights in America, and especially the right to kill anyone they want, get arrested, and then have the local police in a sanctuary city or sanctuary state say, we're going to release you because the ICE officers will be here soon, and we don't want you to get arrested. So we just release you, knowing that we just caught you standing over someone that we saw you murder. We're going to release you into the street. And usually they give them $50, by the way. So, yes, we need to arrest the Dems who vote for these. We need to arrest any police officers who ever release an illegal who's been in for a felony without the permission of ICE first having a chance to pick them up and deport them. Any one of them ever, and I mean going back in time, if they did it, that's criminal. They need to be treated they need to be locked up and kept locked up, not like the illegal aliens who are locked up and released.
All right, in closing, we're finished with the tweets. I would like you to focus in on this beast that we have, and we've shown people all the variations of this beast and how our planet is just going to be absolutely locked down digitally, and we're going to be slaves to this system. But we know that there's a way out. We know where the heart of the beast is. Thomas, where is the weakest point, the Achilles heel? How do we take this monstrosity down? If you were in the Oval Office right now, you would say, President Trump, sir, what would you say? Sign
the check to Leaders Technologies for the Miller Act. That will start the ball rolling. The dominoes will fall. You'll get control of the internet. The biggest, most dangerous thing in the face of the earth right now is the internet. It is weaponized, and the globalists are at the control, but they don't have control because they can't close it down. They can manipulate it like they did in China recently with Facebook, and with Eric Schmidt being over there. They created a social manipulation network through the internet that they call Dragonfly, and they think they can do that. Wrong. We can turn off the substructure from one day to the next. That would end all commerce.
Now, I want you to explain that.
It would be, you'd close it down for a day, and when you opened it up, there'd be no more surveillance. It would probably be so inexpensive it would be ridiculous. The government would make a huge amount of money. Those corporations would be charged with racketeering, monopoly, antitrust, as well as many other crimes.
You know, here we go again. The corporation is charged with something, but the people that ran that corporation, there's nothing that happens to them. How do you put a corporation in jail?
No, that's why you do it, because then they immediately fold. They go bankrupt. That's the beauty of a corporation. They are not culpable for anything.
Facebook doesn't go yes. belly up and it continues to be fined, and
it becomes a public utility, and it doesn't change anything on the stock market. Because why? You get a proper we have all these government monopolies, and no one wants to admit it. And we just found the biggest one called Intrust. They put a tax on every single thing on the internet. It's the largest collection of money in
history,
in American history, but all history. And basically what it is it's a substructure that can be simply turned off. There is one central control. And when you get to that control, you control everything. All cryptology, all backdoors, the mechanical engines, you control everything.
And aren't these people, these CIOs that are on this council, don't they actually work for the president anyway?
They do, and that's why he can close this. All he has to do is not charter Intrust and the other 100 or so companies that have been allowed, including British companies, Australian companies, especially Canadian companies, who have been allowed to illegally and unknowingly tax everything on the internet. There is no net neutrality at all. And because we stopped net neutrality, we can now charge these people for their crimes, because this is a Canadian crime. This is a Canadian espionage crime. They have all of our crypto codes to the Department of Defense, to our satellites, to everything, and we don't have them. And when the Federal Bridge Certification Authority...
So the Canadians are our enemies,
Yes.
as well as the people from, or the United Kingdom. I won't say the people and the citizens, but their governments.
The United Kingdom, all 54 of them, the ones that do not have offshore banking that basically creates the greatest theft of wealth in the world, are controlled by the United Kingdom, by Britain, by the Queen, by her golden shares, by her Privy Council. And all you have to do is look up who owns what companies, and you'll see that. And remember, Canada is nothing more than a little teensy tiny place with very few people. It's a huge place with few people, and they really have very little power, except that they seem to get their hands into all of our digital management through Serco and through companies like NTL and other companies.
Well, that all has to be coming from the Queen and the
Correct.
Privy Council. So if we were able to do this, what would happen to this British control over America?
It would end and they'd stop being paid their taxes. And it's really very simple to do, and it's already being done. We outed the Crown agents. Well, they're not making hardly any money because the OPEC was outed and they're not being funded. Trump just turned around and defunded them by a huge percentage. The refugees, which feed the UN refugee program that feeds the Pope, not being funded. He just stopped it. The UN peacekeepers, he just stopped it because they're rapists and they're some of the worst people in the world. He's manipulating the World Trade Organization, very interestingly. I don't want to go into that. But he's also taken the controls of the New York Stock Exchange. That's why he is controlling those 500-point fallbacks. That's what's needed. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that. He's taken control through the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Marshals, and the Office of Intelligence and Analysis. The recent, and through Mike Mulvaney, and the recent Inspector General investigations throughout all federal governments, we've only seen one report, and that report brought in hundreds of indictments, 235 indictments that are solid, but thousands of indictments, 235 convictions, $714 million collected, and that was only for a quarter. That was 1/4 of the year. This is going to continue. The swamp is leaving. We've had unprecedented senators and a number of senators and Democrats leave. We've had, we have some of the most corrupt people just leaving before they get caught. We have John McCain, who might have died, conveniently, or he might not be dead. He might just be going on to what he was always doing, which is
Did anybody see his corpse?
Nope. And nobody saw him. Did anybody see a picture of him in hospital?
No.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody get a message from him? The man who blabbers continuously, did he have a single press conference in the hospital?
And we never really got proof of life because as soon as we started asking for it, we got, he's going to be, he's not going to have his cancer treatments anymore, and the next day he was dead.
And remember, why did they not cover with a bandage that stitching on his head that said it was a brain surgery? Well, if that was brain surgery, that would have gone into his temporal lobe and he wouldn't be able to speak. I mean, they think we're so stupid. He changed the leg that he hurt back and forth daily.
Yes.
One day it was on one leg in the wheelchair. The next day it was on the other leg. He is the man who released the Russian dossier to the world even before BuzzFeed, because when BuzzFeed did it, he had to get out in front of the narrative. He has led the coup against Trump, one of the major leaders, with Obama and with Hillary and Podesta.
Okay. Final words?
My final words is people need to be encouraged. Do not think for 1 second that Trump is losing. Here's what's happening. Every time he does one of those speeches, those people, because they got to meet a real president who tells the truth, which is the first time in their life, some of them are 70, 80 years old and say, I've never voted. You're the only honest politicians I've ever met. Okay, those are warriors for Trump. Now, we see 15,000, 10,000. Every place is filled to the maximum, thousands waiting. Those are, okay, Obama's got his 33,000 who are paid by Soros and his OFA.
And don't forget his senior executive service crew.
And his 10,000 senior executive service shadow government. But Trump has the base. He has the grassroots. And right now we keep seeing, I've seen 4 or 5 people demand it must be paper ballots, or at least a paper backup. So when we demand, if Trump loses any single district, we want a paper count because we don't believe y'all. And then that's what they're moving forward. You see, just everyone saying this. because we have revealed that op tech has manipulated and can manipulate with a high school level hacking through PC Anywhere, any election machine in America. 12-year-olds at the recent DEF CON demonstrated that in less than 2 minutes she can hack any election machine. We got to stop that. There has to be a paper trail. We can let the electric machines count them, but we need the paper trail for the recount, because we're going to demand a recount if he doesn't win with the landslide this time, and the MAGA people who are on his side, because the Dems have become, okay, last time they allowed a socialist, an admitted socialist, Bernie Sanders, who wasn't a socialist before, to run as a Democrat. Now he's running as a socialist. Now they allow fascist socialists to run into the Democratic Party.
It's their party to do with what they want, you know?
Mueller's October surprise with Flynn, fail. With Carter Page, fail. With George Papadopoulos, fail. With 25 Russians, fail. With 3 Russian companies, fail. With Rodstein's obfuscation and lies about the FISA court, fail. With Bruce Orr, who we can't fire, we're going to fire him. He's going to fail. Lisa Page, we're glad you're gone. And Peter Strzok, one day people are going to find out who you are, and it will be probably a publicized execution. And the rest of you, get in line. I just hope they got a lot of rope.
Gallows to go.